let's go into our open segment. Obviously, big time year for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. The nominees list came out last month, and this month we got those voting results in. And this is our first show since that's happened. Carl Edwards, Ricky Rudd, they were the selections for the modern era ballot, and Ralph Moody got in on the pioneer ballot. So, Brandon, I'll go to you first. What is your reaction to Carl Edwards and Ricky Rudd getting in? And I think Edwards certainly a little bit divided opinion on him. Some people thought maybe it was too soon. Others, like myself, had no issue with that. What was your take on the results from the Hall of Fame class this year?
It kind of made sense to see Ricky Rudd there, and of course Ralph Moody. That I was just kind of waiting for that to happen, along with many other names that were waiting on to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. But Carl Edwards, yeah, it does make sense, and but also at the same time, there are some other names you would think that you would want to put there before you got to Carl. But I mean, looking at his impressive resume with Roush Racing and back in the day with the Busch Series and the Truck Series and all the backflips he gave us over the years, those weren't for nothing. Those are because he was a really good race car driver, and the dog agrees as well. I think Carl deserves that spot as much as anyone else. But I go with something you've said before, Ben, about it. Um, there are some that we need to put in the Hall of Fame now, as opposed to years down the road when maybe they won't be able to give their own speech, or maybe they'll already have passed away and they won't be able to give their speech. So it is a good thing to be putting those who are among the living in the Hall of Fame so they can actually come in good mental capacity and come give their speech.
Well, before we go to Joe, on that note, I saw a comment come in from Adam saying Harry Gant deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Certainly,
He
no
does.
disagreements there, and I believe he was actually third on the ballot behind Rudd with 87%, Edwards with 52. Joe, you grew up a Harry Gant fan. You obviously have a great deal of respect for him, and I think you were pulling for him to get in the Hall this time around. It sounds like he is very close to having his name called for the Hall of Fame, maybe the class of 26. What was your reaction to the results that we got for the class of 25?
Well, first of all, definitely all the congratulations to all the drivers that got into the Hall of Fame this year. They earned it. Ricky Rudd, Carl Edwards. I was one of those people that was surprised that he got in this year. But when you look at his racing record, it does speak for itself. He is very much a driver that, when he was racing, connected with the fans, brought the fans a lot of joy, brought a lot for the sport. I think his departure overshadowed a lot, but at the end of the day, worthy of being in there. Harry Gant, especially when it comes to some of the records, I think will be very hard to beat. Oldest driver to win, Mr. September. He is one of those drivers that, for the longest time, he was always consistently there, week in, week out. I've known he doesn't have any championships. People have said, "Oh, if we had the sprint chase format, it would have been a very different story." He put in a one-time, maybe even a two-time champion. But at the end, he is known for his dedication to the fans, always being one of those drivers as NASCAR was growing, making time for the fans, being a simple guy as well, too. This was an era where the drivers, a lot of times they just stayed at a hotel near the track. Now the drivers, they got the motor coaches. They're pretty much at the track all the time. Very different era of the sport where it was growing. And at the end of the day, I think he is worthy of being in the Hall of Fame as well, too. Third place, I think it really shows, but you look at his win total at 18, that's around the same number as Neil Bonnet, Jeffrey Bodine, other drivers that have records as well, too, and accomplishments that also should be recognized. It's just really this format of the modern era and the pioneer era. It just makes it where it's very limiting on who gets in.
Well, I think that's been the argument all along the last several years for people that were maybe pulling for somebody who didn't get in, and you can say that they got snubbed or whatever. But I think Harry Gant is very close. I would not be surprised if he goes in next year. Obviously, last year, because of the way the ballot is divided, to your point, Brandon, as well, I think if you didn't get in on the modern era in 23, sorry, you got to wait 2 years this time, because everybody knew Jimmy and Chad were going to go in as that 1-2 punch there. And I think that, again, I've always said, the original 25 nominees from when the Hall of Fame first broke ground should have all gone in right away. They're all in now anyway. Nobody should have been here arguing like, well, okay, David Pearson is more deserving than, Cale Yarborough, but Cale is maybe more deserving than Bobby Allison or Darrell. What? Like, of course, they're all deserving of the Hall of Fame. I don't understand why we couldn't just make that clear since we were kind of late to the party here in building a Hall of Fame for NASCAR specifically, and just put them all in right away. Brock Beard and I were talking earlier this week as well, because he was a little surprised as well that Carl Edwards got in this quickly, and I obviously disagree with that. I wrote an entire op-ed for the website. In fact, you can go check that out. I'm not going to repeat everything that I said there here. I'll touch on it a little bit, but he was saying that the 50 greatest drivers from 98 should have all gone in straight away because that would have taken care of a lot of the pioneers from back in the day. And again, to your point, Brandon, as well, Harry Gant isn't getting any younger. We talked on this show when the nominees list came out and AJ Foyt was taken off the ballot. I wasn't a huge fan of that because, again, AJ Foyt is pushing 90 years old now. And, you hate to bring it up. You hate to sound morbid about it, but, it's just, you just got to be real and state the facts that, he doesn't have too many years left with us, you would think. And if you're going to put him in the Hall, you have to honor him while he's still here to be able to give his own speech. Because, just imagine the stories that AJ Foyt would be able to tell. And he's not the only one. Herschel McGriff, who went through this a few years ago as well. Thank goodness he got in on the Pioneer ballot when he did. So again, I understand the arguments for, somebody like a Neil Bonnet. I, again, said that I'd love seeing the lower series get represented a little bit better, when it comes to the Hall of Fame. And that's why it was great to finally see Jack Sprague nominated. I think that was long overdue. Larry Phillips got moved from the Modern Era ballot to the Pioneer ballot this year. He probably would have been my Pioneer pick if I had a ballot. So again, I think this year's class in particular, they all had very strong cases. But the reason why Carl would have been on my ballot is because I think when it comes to the raw statistics, and I know that shouldn't be the weight for the entire weight for everybody's argument here. I think, your contributions to the sport can show outside of a stat sheet, what you do in broadcasting. Neil Bonnet obviously had a career in that before his life was tragically cut short. But Carl did lead the nominees list rather for most Cup Series wins. And then you factor in his Xfinity career, and Brandon, you and I had this discussion about Justin Allgaier a couple times, talking about Justin Allgaier being potentially close to the Hall of Fame if he adds a championship or two to his resume. Carl's Xfinity career alone is 38 Xfinity wins and a championship in that series. And I feel like Jack Ingram is proof of this. If you don't know who the driver is and you tell somebody 38 wins in Xfinity and a championship, if that's all anybody ever did, I think that alone probably puts you in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
and you couple that with his Cup stats, I think the argument for maybe Edwards waiting a little bit holds some merit to it. But I don't understand the people that were saying he doesn't deserve to even be on the ballot list. I think he absolutely deserved to be there and ultimately deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, you had all that success in the Xfinity Series, and then you look at his 2015 resume in the Cup Series, Coca-Cola 600 win, Southern 500 win. Yeah. I mean, the man, and you also add his charisma and his personality. Like I think we lost a big chunk of the Cup Series garage persona when Carl Edwards decided to hang it up at the end of 2016, and we've rebuilt a lot of that with our new faces, which aren't so new anymore. But that was a big punch in the gut for NASCAR. Like, man, we've really got to find some more personality because we lost a big personality in Carl Edwards.
Yeah, but sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just gonna say, when you look also at the numbers of Cup Series winners, Carl Edwards, 28 wins, 30th on the list. Granted, there's a lot of ties up ahead of him, but the only two drivers ahead of him not in the Hall of Fame right now, Kurt Busch, Kevin Harvick. Of course, they just both recently stepped away too, so won't be long till they'll be in, and Carl Edwards is easily one of those drivers that should be in. I was just so caught off guard because I thought, okay, this is his first year. Maybe the second year he'll get in. So that was the big surprise for me, was Carl Edwards getting the first year. Happy for him, but just a bit caught off guard, I guess you would say, when I heard the announcement.
Well, it was his fourth year on the ballot.
Fourth year, okay.
Yeah. Carl, his first year was 21, and then there was no class 22 because of the pandemic, and he's been on every year since then. So wasn't a first ballot Hall. I mean, I don't think he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. To be clear, I think Dale Jr. maybe hasn't. I mean, if Jr. had been like, imagine Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, and Dale Jr. all retired the same year. I don't think Dale Jr. is a first ballot Hall of Famer if that's his competition. I think given who he was on the ballot with, I had no problem with him going in first ballot. But again, I think it all depends on the circumstances and when your time comes to be nominated here. But yeah, like you said, Joe, I think there's only two names that are above him on the wins list that aren't either active or in the Hall of Fame already, and it's the two guys that are recently retired that aren't even yet Hall of Fame eligible. And we know that, of course, they're both champions that'll get in one day. So when you look at, I mean, literally everybody on that list ahead of him is either in the Hall or we know will be in the Hall at one point. I think Denny Hamlin was the only non-champion among that, that isn't already in the Hall or still active or recently retired. But we know with 54 wins and even more success in Xfinity as well. And now what he's doing in the ownership realm was 2311. I think that plays no small role in building his resume up a little bit as well. So we know he's going to be in the Hall one day as well. But again, I think that it bothers me a little bit that we've slowed down to the point where we're only putting 3 in at a time. And especially because we lost a year because of the pandemic, I think that really, people were making the argument that 5 is too many in the Hall of Fame is maybe getting watered down. But I think what we've realized now is, in trying to divide the ballot up, is we still have a lot of deserving pioneers that we've got to put in the Hall of Fame. And I appreciate separating the ballot in theory, because it should guarantee that one goes in every year, and it does guarantee one goes in every year. But that's just it. There's only one. I think when you look at that pioneer ballot every year, the fact that we've had to take a couple of names off of it, because Sam Ard, I mean, again, you talk about Xfinity drivers, and there was Busch Grand National at the time, obviously, but what Sam Ard did, a pioneer in that series, I think absolutely deserving in the Hall of Fame. I might have voted for him if I had a ballot the last couple of years, and it troubled me that he didn't make it back onto the ballot this year. So I understand the argument, especially from some old school fans in particular, that maybe it wasn't Carl's time just yet. But again, I think his resume holds up when compared to everybody else on the ballot. But I do very much understand the argument that we have a lot of people still waiting to get in that probably should have been in a long time ago.
Another one of these drivers, I mean, the one we're missing here is Ricky Rudd, and the Rooster, as he was called, just the tough as nails persona. Yeah. I mean, that's a no-brainer, man. And I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for Ricky Rudd, because my dad's name is Ricky, and like he raised me on Davey Allison, and of course that was after a brief period with Dale Jarrett, that's the spot that Ricky Rudd filled for the bulk of the rest of his career there with Robert Yates and the gang and Yates engines. But man, just there's nothing like seeing the back and forth between like him and Ryan Preece, and just being all sunken in the face from a terrible crash and just coming back the next day. All right, let's go. I mean, and also, and you go back to the Dale Jr. download and hearing when they had him on there, I'm so glad he was able to come on there and talk about his time with Richard Childress and how he felt like he, like that was going to be his destiny, and fate had different plans, and all of a sudden it's Dale Sr. that took the legacy of the 3, but it was almost in an alternate universe, almost Ricky Rudd in the RCR3.
Yeah, couldn't be happier for Ricky Rudd. Again, I just, and in the interest of full transparency, if I had a ballot this year, it would have been, I think, Edwards, Bonnet, and Phillips. But I couldn't be happier for Ralph Moody. I think absolutely, again, another deserving, overdue pioneer of our sport. And couldn't be happier for Ricky Rudd. I think, a soft surprise given how many years. I think this was his 8th year on the ballot. So he was almost using up his modern era eligibility before he would have had to move to the pioneer ballot. In just a few years' time, reaching that 10-year time limit. But really hard to argue against it, given his longevity and that consecutive start streak, which, again, I think he didn't fully retire in 2006. He came out of retirement to be a relief driver for Tony Stewart for one race, and then, of course, came fully out of retirement in 2007 to run one more year in the Yates car. So I think, that Ironman streak that Jeff Gordon has since broken, I think, really could have been extended by, close to 65, 70 more races. I know he got hurt at the end of 2007, had to miss a few races there at the end of the year, but He probably could have extended it well into the mid 800s, even longer than it was. So I think his longevity, plays no small role in his resume as well. But again, you contrast that to the point that you made, Brandon, about Carl Edwards, and you brought this up as well, Joe, stepping away so soon. I think that, some people argue that, maybe the fact that he just kind of walked away from everything so suddenly, maybe hurts his case. I think if anything, it only helps his case, because you look at the numbers that he put up, and then you realize that he did step away much sooner than we were expecting him to. So it's all condensed into really only about a 12-year time period. And that's, almost 2.5 Cup Series wins per year when you do the math. I mean, the guy was so good straight from his rookie year with Roush Racing in 2005. I know he ran the back portion of a 2004 season, so he wasn't officially eligible for Rookie of the Year, but still a very strong, true rookie season. And then obviously very nearly won a championship in 2011 in that tiebreaker with Tony Stewart, and then had one hand on it, as we like to say here on this network, a lot of the time in 2016 before late race restart ruined that, obviously. And who would have thought that would be his last moment in the sport? It's unfortunate, because I do wish, I think he had a lot more talent to give, and who knows where his numbers would have ended up if he'd stayed a few more years. But we can only look at the reality of what we have, and I think, again, thoroughly deserving of the Hall of Fame. You can argue if he should have gotten in this year or not, but I think you can't deny that his numbers hold up, and he should be in the Hall regardless.
And we'd love for him to come back. I know he probably wants nothing to do with it, but we would love to see him come back.
Well, I threw that tweet out there. It always amazes me. I've got the tweet from last night about Dave Blaney winning Daytona in 2012. And I don't know. Sometimes it's the tweets that have no hashtags or don't tag anybody that somehow end up going the most viral or blowing up, as the kids say. But I tweeted that when the Stage 60 Cam Watersteel was being tweeted out. It's like the year is 2038, and Roush Fenway, LeBron James, Keselowski Racing is teasing the Stage 60 car as Chris Buescher enters his retirement tour, and Scarlett Keselowski is about to make her Cup debut. And here comes the Stage 60 ride, and Twitter says, you know who it might be? Carl Edwards. And I think we're going to continue to be floating his name out there for many years to come. But it is probably, like you mentioned, Brandon, only wishful thinking. I think he's, again, this point was brought up as well. He's a very private person. He has famously still refused to join Twitter and social media. And honestly, God bless him, because I appreciate the tool that social media is. It's probably the only reason that we're all connected here right now, if we're being honest. But I still have a great amount of respect for people that want nothing to do with it and don't get caught up in it, because it can be an ugly place at times as well. But I know a lot of people have had, for all the naysayers and doubters, there's been an equal amount, or probably even greater amount, of people that are thrilled for Carl and thrilled for Ricky as well. And also thrilled for Ralph Moody. So a great Hall of Fame class, I think, in all three of these individuals. I don't have a problem with either of them going in this year, and already looking forward to the nominees list coming out for next year in the class of 26. But first, we'll induct them in the early months of 2025. So really looking forward to that. And let us know if you're watching in the chat, or leave a comment if you're watching afterwards. Would you have picked these three, or is there somebody else that you think deserved it more? And go ahead and make the case, because this is something that I love. It's a conversation I love having every year around this time of year. And again, I know it was kind of pushed back a little bit last year, because they were trying to decide if Jimmy was eligible because he came back to race part-time. But always love this time of year, and getting to reminisce on the history of our sport and all these individuals that were a part of creating it. So congratulations again to the class of 25. And we'll look forward to seeing them inducted very soon here later this offseason.